So let's talk about a Games Workshop product recall, what appears to be visions of new Kroot in the rumour engine, Henry Cavill sharing Warhammer teasers, Games Workshop IP things, next reveal shows and more, with a big roundup of minor 40k news things from the last couple of weeks. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're doing a roundup of a whole bunch of Warhammer goings on, talking through a whole bunch of minor reveals, teasers and other news, none of which I thought needed an entire video all to itself, though I still found interesting. There's really quite a lot to cover for this one. I'll leave some of the topics here on the screen. As you can see, quite a lot to talk about, so let's jump straight in and talk all things Warhammer and 40k. First up, one small thing I found interesting was that Games Workshop's had a product recall recently. It's kind of unusual that Games Workshop ships something out, gives it to their discount resellers, and then basically gives them a note to ask them to recall and destroy it. But that seems to have been what's happened with the Necromunda upgrades they had go live recently. This is basically a plastic weapon upgrade sprue for the Palatine Enforcers, who are basically the rather brutal and militarised Imperial police force on the planet. Thanks to the person who let me know about this one, it was interesting to see, and it seems there's been a fair bit of speculation as to why Games Workshop's done this. I don't believe they gave their discount retailers any specific explanation for the most part, just basically communicating by email and asking their sellers to basically destroy the things they'd shipped out to them and not sell them, and then Games Workshop will issue refunds to their discount sellers for all those weapon sets that they'd shipped out. One possible explanation for it could be that they've got the wrong picture on the front of the box set. Most of the weapons and gear in the box are pictured on the front, though there's one pistol piece that quite clearly isn't in the bits that you can make out of the box set. So I wonder if the explanation for Games Workshop asking people to destroy that is so they can't be accused of false advertising. I'd certainly be interested to hear if there's any other reason they might have asked for these to be taken down. I feel like it's maybe been not quite as major or well publicised a thing, seeing as it's a release for Necromunda, which maybe had a little bit more limited appeal than if it was a big one for Warhammer 40k or something. Next up, Games Workshop seems to have had a couple of fairly interesting rumour engines that look very possible for Warhammer 40k, and interestingly both one that was this week and a couple of weeks ago. Both appear like they could be for something Kroot. The Tau Empire had their Kroot range entirely refreshed and redone fairly stylishly in 10th edition. Most people were fairly happy with that update, but there's two parts here that kind of imply that it might not be the very end for their stuff that they're getting released. The rumour engine on the right at first impressions looks like it could be a Krootox claw that's basically been redone bionic style. The image on the top right is one of the ones from the Krootox Rampages, and then the big armoured gauntlet thing that we can see looks like what you might expect if it lost its arm and it had it replaced with Tau tech. The finger bits may be kind of reminiscent of a Tau battlesuit, but in the same sort of design as the Krootox's front claw. The sort of tribal triangle designs also are pretty similar to other things that we've seen for the Kroot. As well as that, there's also this gun as well that appeared in another week's one. It looks like it's a shotgun thing with a bunch of cartridges, and it does look like it lines up pretty closely with a few of the Farstalker's weapons. There's three metallic rectangular looking things under a black looking carapace, kind of similar to the weapon here. And I guess if we put the two together, that could be something like a mounted Shaper on a Krootox. That feels like it wouldn't be the hardest stretch to imagine. We've had a mounted Kroot character in the Lone Spear already, but he wasn't really a leader and didn't ride a Krootox. So still feels like there's plenty of space in the range if they did want to release one. I'm not exactly sure when such a release would happen. If it was a character model, I guess it might be a limited edition miniature, or part of Games Workshop's end edition campaign that we presume is happening. But either way, it looks like we might have a little bit more Kroot on the horizon. They have had plenty of things with 40k relevant technology in the rumour engines as well. The other one that they had was a bank of screens, one of them chipped. This one's maybe a little bit harder to say exactly what faction it might be. Maybe something Necromunda or Genestealer Corp might not be the worst shout in the world given the chipped screen, though I guess it could be something Imperial. Or maybe it's completely out there, it's the Red Gobbo compiling his Christmas list. Moving on, we've now had 40k's most recent balanced data slate out for around 10 days or so now. What happened for Games Workshop was that it got leaked early. They accidentally scheduled something wrong on their app, so decided to release all the downloads all at once, and then the week after, on the Wednesday that it was presumably supposed to come out, they posted an article talking in vague terms through some of their changes and roughly what motivations they had for them. One of the things that was maybe a little bit out of step with what they'd been saying they'd do was that there weren't any detachments this time around. We had the big rollout of Grotma's detachments last Christmas, and then in the two balanced data slate updates since then, we'd had a few more new detachments come out for certain armies. Last time we had Dark Angel's Wrath of the Rock, Tyranid Subterranean Assault, and the Cabal of Chaos. I was wondering whether or not these would turn up last Wednesday, but it turned out they didn't. Instead, on that article, Games Workshop said we weren't able to supply new detachments, they weren't quite ready in time, but we do intend to add more at the next update. I guess for the December one, unless they go the whole hog and release a bunch of Grotmas ones again. It might mean that we get twice as much as usual, possibly 6 instead of 3, unless they turn up with whichever post-data slate FAQ they usually do, then I guess we'll have a while to wait for them. Though it also seems that we've got another digital update that's been lost in limbo for a bit. There's new Deathwatch veterans out, with their box set from Kill Team Tomb World, and also the Necron's Geomancer. There were 2 updates I was strongly expecting we might see with the balance updates, but it turned out we didn't. Particularly as Kill Team Tomb World is out, and most people have got their hands on the models now. Hopefully they turn up on another random Wednesday. I'll certainly look forward to taking a look at the datasheets when we get them. Before we move on to Henry Cavill teasers, Battle Force prices and lots more, I'll just give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor in Tabletop Stronghold, the video sponsor who wanted to share their range of magnetic carry cases, which currently have a bigger sale discount than normal for them, marked down around about 30% across their range. Magnetic miniature transport is a pretty popular way to get models from A to B these days, the idea being that you put magnets on the bases of your miniatures and they're attached to metal surfaces, so you can have lots and lots of miniatures in a very tight space within one box without the danger of them bashing or damaging each other and not needing insulating foam. Tabletop Stronghold makes some custom built cases that can work for Warhammer miniatures. Their mag case designs are made of a very sturdy MDF box, very hard to break or damage once it's assembled. And then inside those boxes go different layers worth of steel trays, slotting in at different heights depending on what sort of height of miniatures you're transporting. On the front there's a nice acrylic sheet so you can see what's where, and always nice to show off some nice paint jobs when things are in storage or transit. Broadly speaking, reviews of these have tended to be quite positive when I've seen them, both in places like Reddit and down in the YouTube comments. They also have a competitive terrain set as well with some MDF terrain if you're in the market for that. They have some particularly big discounts if you pick one of those up alongside a mag case. If you'd like to check out their things, there'll be links down in the video description, and I'll cycle back to them briefly at the end of the video to talk through their exact range. Next up though, I was interested to see that over the weekend Henry Cavill had been driving a little bit of interest and speculation around the Amazon series. Warhammer hobbyists perhaps understandably tend to have a lot of interest in any sort of Warhammer things that is pictured doing, and while sharing an injured foot there were quite notably some Horus Heresy 3.0 manuals in the foreground, so it looks like somebody might have picked up the Saturnine box. Perhaps more intriguingly, he posted lines from a poem called Invictus. I think one I maybe heard the name of before but didn't really know anything about it. Apparently it's a classic poem from 1875 by William Ernest Henley. While it feels like some of the words might kind of apply to Warhammer 40k, the poem seems to be more about overcoming adversity, particularly in relation to health. It seems like it's more likely to be relating to his injury things as opposed to anything Warhammer related, despite it being a fairly Warhammer sounding word. Just over the weekend I saw a whole bunch of sites saying that it could be some sort of cryptic hint to be something to do with the upcoming Warhammer show, maybe Saul Invictus of the Ultramarines. There are plenty of other things within Warhammer 40k that use that name. Giving is clearly showing an injury though, just seems far more likely to me to be related to that than anything 40k related, but it seems to be enough to get people's imaginations fired. Let me know what you make of Injured Leg, Heresy rulebooks and Invictus poem down in the comments though. Next up, this week's really quite a big Warhammer 40k release week. We've got the Drukhari coming out and the Death Korps of Krieg. I was interested to see what sort of prices they might be coming out at. I've seen the US dollar prices shared fairly widely online, and from the price rise changes we can translate them over to the others a bit. Perhaps the worst news for the pricing is that the big Real Space Raiders Battle Force box set with all the Drukhari infantry and the Venom, that looks like it's on the very slightly higher end of the Battle Force box set prices, $240, so that'd be around £150 or €190. Certainly could be a downside if that was one that you're thinking of picking up. Might aim to cycle back to have another look at that in the next video on the channel alongside the other 40k discount box sets we know are coming. Otherwise, seems that Lady Malice is $48, £29 or €37. That's an increase on the normal named Epic Hero price, and that looks like it's going to be the new normal unfortunately for Games Workshop's 4% price rise or so. Codex Drukhari still seems to be $60. I believe it's going to be £38 or €50, so slight rises in the UK and EU, but not in the USA. I believe the new Combat Patrol prices are $170 and then £105 or €135, so that'll be the Krieg ones and the Drukhari. And then finally I was interested to take a look at the Rax prices. I was expecting that when they decided to rebox them they might be going for more general release, but it still looks like one of the core Drukhari troops choices are direct only still. Their standalone box is going to be $60 for 10, so around £37 or €51. I believe that should be a little cheaper per rack compared with when they were sold in sets of 5, but any savings lessened a bit as direct only items don't generally tend to have good discounts. As ever, if you were looking to pick up anything at the weekend, the channel's affiliate discount retailers links down in the video description. They can save anywhere between 10 and 20% off depending on where you are in the world. There's some good examples in most countries there, and a big thank you to anyone who chooses to pick things up by ordering them in those links. It does help to support Auspex Tactics and keep these videos coming. Talking of pricing and price rises, I'll probably just mention as a heads up that the Warhammer price rise might just be happening a little bit sooner than some people realise, at least from the discount retailer stores that a lot of people tend to buy from. Games Workshop's Warhammer price rise goes into effect on the 6th of October, I believe, on their web store, though I believe that most discount retailers have to finalise any orders 1 week in advance. So it means that in the interim, a lot of discount stores might be able to take orders at the previous prices, but if they actually order in any stock from Games Workshop, they'll have to order them in and pay Games Workshop the higher amount, so you might see some discount retailers charge higher slightly before Games Workshop do. That just means the next 2 or 3 days might be one of the last chances to get your hands on the slightly cheaper 40k prices before they go up around about 4% or so. So just bear that in mind if there was a purchase that you were trying to do before the price rise happens. Obviously, as ever, this isn't a good reason to go out and buy things that you wouldn't have anyway, as a 4% discount doesn't exactly matter anywhere near as much as buying 100% of a not needed kit. But if you did know that there was a kit that you were absolutely going to buy either before or just after, this could potentially be a last few days to do so. For future Space Marine releases, one thing that seems likely to be happening in the sort of middle distance future could be a new set of Mark V armour. That's the armour variant with all the bonding studs, named Heresy armour, and typically employed when resources were scarce. This one isn't one that Games Workshop has in a plastic set at the moment. I believe there's some resin ones that you can get your hands on, like these ones pictured here. So they have released a couple of miniatures in the armour mark, such as this Apothecary Medic one here. If they go with the same pattern as what they did for the 2nd edition Horus Heresy, they had a sort of mid-edition big box that had a Mark III armour set come out, and that was packaged alongside a Proteus Land Raider and a Derrideo Dreadnought. If so, then it means that we could get some upscaled Mark V armour. It might land in a similar sort of box set, maybe around about 1.5 to 2 years into the edition. Though if it did happen like that, that'd still be really quite a good way away now. There's plenty of things that could be happening before that, though, for the Horus Heresy. We are likely to get some new Cataphracti Terminators. They teased them with one holding a Volkite weapon in the trailer, and we know they have their Adeptus Custodes coming shortly. There do seem to be a fair few things for the Age of Darkness that could be very easy to steal for Chaos Marine armies for 40k. I was informed that Games Workshop's also done another fairly biggish IP takedown recently, this one being a digital resource to help Kill Team called Kill Team Battlekit. Basically a fan-made digital tool that wasn't being monetized at all, and was used by really quite a lot of players to help reference and pass Kill Team rules, as Games Workshop's digital offerings are pretty subpar compared with their support for many of their other game modes out there. As ever though, Games Workshop are pretty keen to shut down anyone who's sharing their rules in any form, even if it does make one of their game systems quite a lot more playable. It sounds like they were basically contacted and asked to remove the content, Games Workshop preferring to keep fully in control of how their rules are distributed in any form. So happy to take down any websites they can, leaving only websites that seem to be beyond their reach, such as Warpedia and its Russian domain name. That still exists as a third-party source to allow you to reference Kill Team rules. Over the past couple of weeks, there's been a few event-related announcements from Games Workshop. One of the next times in which they might have done a reveal show seems to have passed. That seems to be another example of Games Workshop shifting their online preview shows not to be associated with events, much as they did for the Nova Open and Tacoma Open. Games Workshop's new pattern seems to be to still have a presence at these big tournaments and conventions, but focus on things for entertaining the people there and not have sort of global reveals happen at the same time. It looks like at the Las Vegas Open, they're doing Kill Team Laser Tag, a sort of paint and take style events, playing Space Hulk with Joy Toy miniatures, and probably some other things too. It seems like their strategy for reveal shows in the second half of 2025 is to do fewer of them, but to try and make them bigger and more impactful. They do seem to have been quite happy to share big reveals on Mondays, things like announcing codexes or that big Crocs Terminatus box, which is quite a big deal one. For their next reveal show possibilities, it could either be Warhammer Day, whenever that turns out to be, which they said was sometime in late October, or their Grand Narrative World Champions event, which is around the 6th of November. I'd guess they wouldn't do major reveals on both of them, so it might well be one or the other. Currently, for more obvious things for Warhammer 40k, the bigger questions are what sort of end edition campaign they might be doing for 10th edition, and what sort of things we might be getting in the Christmas Battle Force box set. I guess for the Christmas Battle Forces, though, they'll be announced on a Warhammer community post, and fairly soonish, as opposed to waiting to a reveal show that will be really quite close to their release. Other possibilities for a show like that could be the next Kill Team box set, and perhaps a good chance for either Cataphracti Terminators or some Adeptus Custodes for Horus Heresy. Otherwise, with event-related things, they had a couple of other small announcements on Warhammer Community, sharing a map of where the Warhammer events team is going later in the year, which is quite a big round trip of the world. A lot of their more major appearances have often been in the USA. Looks like they're hitting up a few locations in Europe and more in Australia as well. I believe they've been to most of these ones before. I'm not super well informed about all of them. Maybe a couple of the locations are new. Finally, for their events, alongside the World Champions of Warhammer event, they also have a Grand Narrative. That's the one where you have a whole bunch of people playing each other, and you have a few dedicated storyteller type people marshalling the forces of the Imperium, Chaos or Xenos. It's quite a bit higher effort than the vast majority of narrative campaigns out there in the world, and what discussion online I've seen about it has generally been quite positive. Apparently their Grand Narrative for 2025 is going to be set on Mordian, home of the Mordian Iron Guard Imperial Guard Regiment, and apparently the planet is being assailed by both Chaos and Necrons. It'd be kind of hard to imagine an event changing the future of one of the actually better known planets of Warhammer 40k. I think they usually build these things as actually having some sort of lasting impact on the lore. Will be interesting to see if it crops up in any far future Imperial Guard Codex or something. A few people sent some obviously fake datasheets to me. I'm not really too sure why these have gained so much traction on the internet, but I guess people are kind of hungry for new editions and end edition campaign stuff, so maybe the rumours are just going a bit wild. What they appear to be is a datasheet for Ferrus, Manus and some damn Legionnaires, neither of which seems very likely to happen in Warhammer 40k, particularly with Ferrus Manus long dead and shorter by a head. Maybe the Legion of the Damned have a little bit more chance, though they are one of the slightly more out there, oddball elements of Warhammer 40k lore that I really wouldn't expect Games Workshop to revisit unless they were really starting to run out of ideas for things to release. Besides the subject matter seeming really quite fake just at first impressions, they've also spelt it Damned Legionaries as opposed to Damned Legionnaires. That's usually how they've been referred to in the past, and also just casually giving them a leadership 1+ isn't exactly a great endorsement either, particularly given all the other Primarchs and things have a leadership of 5+ at best. Would be cool to see some Legion of the Damned come back at some point in the future. I feel like they'd really have to reach to make Ferrus Manus happen again, outside of some sort of hand-wavy Primarch soul things, but either way this definitely isn't it. It seems that there's another 40k mini expansion type thing in White Dwarf 516. This one's the one that's focused around 10 years of Age of Sigmar, and these aspects of war expansions have generally been used to add a bit of a twist to the standard Warhammer 40k playing experience, designed so they can be used at least somewhat in match play games and in narrative crusade games. The one in this White Dwarf is basically a sort of bartering mechanic called Strategic Gambits, and the idea is that basically after a player has made a roll that they don't like, they can ask their opponent to allow them to buff the roll after it's happened. So say if they fail a charge by an inch or two, they can request the opponent if they're going to be allowed to add +2 to the test, and can try and offer them a reward that they think is worth it. So say giving the opponent somewhere between 1 and 3 extra victory points, 1 or 2 extra command points, or allowing them to immediately do an out of phase maneuver, do a normal or fallback move between 6 to 9 inches. The trade only happens if both players are happy with what they're getting. If one of them disagrees, then it doesn't happen and you just play as normal. This one does feel like a bit of an unusual idea. Would getting a bonus amount of hits be worth 1 command point, or allowing your opponent a tiny victory point penalty? Definitely feels a bit unusual, and I feel like it could make for a good and slightly bantery game. The mechanic itself does seem a weird one though, given that basically Warhammer 40k is usually just between 2 players, so it's basically in both players' interests to offer bad trades to the other person, and if the opponent's getting any sort of advantage out of the equation, then it's going to be a bad thing for you. For these ones, they do seem kind of interesting. They do sort of feel like they're in the kind of mark where people want rules that aren't necessarily super serious or hyper competitive a lot of the time. But then on the other hand, I haven't really heard of a lot of people going all in on these aspect of war style missions, as several of the layered twist things just don't really seem to hit the mark for one reason or another. I'll be interested to hear if you've used any of them down in the comments though. Besides that, for 40k content out of that White Dwarf, there's also some more content for the Space Marines Operation minigame. That's the one where you basically try and play the Space Marine 2 game with models on a tabletop, clearing out some Tyranids from inside some boarding action terrain. White Dwarf 516 added in some rules for extremist pattern enemies, including some scary Zoanthropes, Raveners and Lictors, plus a Terminus boss-style profile for a Hive Tyrant. That might be of some interest to anyone who jumped aboard that game when it came out in White Dwarf a few issues ago. In a Monday reveal, it seems that not only is Horus Heresy getting Combat Patrol style boxes, but Legions Imperialis is too. These ones are also called Combat Forces, similar to the Horus Heresy. I guess seeing as the look and feel is the same with the same name, they'll probably also be the £105, €135 or $170, though I guess we'd not know the final price tag until when they come out near the time. Like the Horus Heresy one, there's one for Astartes, Mechanicum and Solar Auxilia. At first impressions for someone who isn't particularly familiar with the game, the mix of units in them looks kind of fun, a good mix of different flavours of dreadnoughts, support units, plus some tanks and infantry. Obviously depending on the faction, the Mechanicum's got plenty of big stompy automata and things, could be a reasonable enough self-contained starting point if wanting to try out that system. There's a few guard books being either released or re-released, Plenty of new titles, and interestingly, a great big series dedicated to Commissar Yarrick. This one I believe being a rebinding of a bunch of different stories, all being packaged together in a collector style edition. It doesn't necessarily mean there's any sort of bigger focus on him outside of this one, but given that Orcs are rumoured to be a focal army in 11th edition Warhammer 40k, does make me wonder whether or not he might be back to fight Ghazghkull then. Finally, for main 40k news related things, I thought I'd give a quick shout out to a charity raffle that's trying to make some money for a good cause, run by a group called Rally Point Games and Mines, and they're basically raffling off a Red Scorpions army, around 50ish Marines plus a few vehicles and things, and they're posting them out to wherever they need to be around the world, so I guess it's worldwide entry if they can post to you from the UK. The miniatures look nice enough to me. There's what looks to be a Land Raider Helios conversion, I think, plus a whole bunch of Primaris Marines, including some Infernus, Stern Guard, and others. In any case, check them out, links down in the video description. The tickets seem to cost £5 or local equivalent, and seems to go to a good cause for Mind in the UK, so big credit to them for putting in some good efforts for a good cause. That's about it for this one though. Let me know what you make of Games Workshop's prices, products recalls, Kroot Teasers, and prospects for reveal shows and detachments later in the year. I'll be looking forward to hearing all your thoughts down in the comments. That's about the end for this one, though I'll just cycle back to the video sponsor and Tabletop Stronghold for those interested, with their range of magnetic carry cases on sale a fair bit cheaper than they've usually been in the past. In each carry case you have these steel trays that can fit this many miniatures on each of them, around about 90 odd 25mm bases or 6 knight armigers when fully loaded. And then the trays go within their MDF boxes of different sizes. This one's the mini one, costing around £62 or $70 while it's on sale currently. That's apparently inclusive of shipping, though doesn't include import duties or VAT, which might vary depending on location. There's still plenty of room in the smaller one though, as you can see lots of room for some big tanks and Terminators and things. Then they have their standard size mag case, this one really quite a lot taller, plenty of room for some big models such as the Chaos Knight on the ground floor of this one, and the price for that at the moment is £100 or $115. They all come with some magnets included, and I'll leave the dimensions here on the screen. Then they have the really big one, the two of the previous attached together. This one's the option with the slightly more trays. You can get more or fewer of them, which can make the price a little cheaper for this one in particular. Loads of room in this one though, you can see there's a massive great Baneblade in the top of it. Finally, they also do have their MDF competitive terrain sets as well, and it seems that a feature of this particular sale is their bundles on these are extra discounted, so if you pick up a terrain set alongside a standard size mag case, both of them are cheaper than you will be able to get individually. Might be of interest to some people looking for a terrain set for 40k out there. In any case though, thanks to them for sponsoring the video. You can find them linked in the video description below. I'll leave that there for this one though. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. If you'd like to support the channel and keep the videos coming, Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description below. Channel patrons get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, an automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link's down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.